The winter morning was supposed to be silent, heavy with grief, wrapped in the slow, hollow stillness that follows tragedy. A layer of pale fog lay over the small mountain village, soft as cotton and just as suffocating. Every breath the villagers took rose like ghosts in the cold air, drifting toward the pine trees that surrounded the old churchyard. The frost glittered faintly on the branches, and the snow crunched beneath boots as people moved quietly, their faces drawn, their eyes red. In the center of them all was a small wooden casket. Too small, too light, too wrong. Inside rested the body of 6-year-old Anya Petrov, a child the whole village adored. She had been the kind of girl who ran barefoot through wet grass, laughed even at the clouds, and believed every animal could understand her words. She collected stones shaped like hearts, sang to birds, and once cried for hours when her cat hurt its paw. Her smile had been a part of the village, like the sound of the river or the chiming of the distant chapel bell. But that smile had faded only days ago, stolen by a sudden illness that arrived like a thief in the night. No one expected her delicate body to fail so quickly. No one believed she could leave so soon. Her mother, Elena, still woke up thinking she heard her child running down the hallway, her footsteps light and quick, her laugh echoing through the house. Now, standing beside the small casket, Elena looked frozen, not by the cold, but by something deeper and immeasurable. Grief had carved itself into her face. She held a tiny white scarf in her hands, the one she had knitted for Anya last winter. It was too small to offer warmth, but she clutched it anyway as if it held the last trace of her daughter. Next to her, Father Dmitri murmured a prayer in a low, trembling voice. His old hands shook as he held the cross, because even he, who had buried many souls, could not make sense of burying a child. Behind him, villagers stood in respectful silence, some crying openly, others staring at the snow to hide their tears. The wind was quiet, as if nature itself mourned. A pair of horses stamped their hooves, pulling the funeral sled decorated with pine branches. Beyond them, the forest stretched endlessly, dark, ancient, and watchful. The trees were tall, their needles dusted with ice. The air smelled of wood and winter. Just as the priest prepared to close his prayer, a long, low howl sliced through the cold air. People stiffened. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. That was no dog. Everyone knew the sound of wolves. They lived deep in the forest, rarely seen, almost mythical in their elusiveness. For one to venture close to the village, especially during a gathering, was unnatural. Another howl followed, closer. The horses snorted in fear. One of them reared slightly, tugging at the reins. Someone whispered that wolves were bad omens, especially at funerals. Others looked toward the tree line, unease crawling through their spines. Father Dmitri tried to calm them. "Wild animals do not concern us," he said, though his voice betrayed uncertainty. "Let us finish." He lifted the cross again. But before a single word left his lips, a sudden movement appeared between the trees. A shape, large, gray, silent. A wolf stepped out of the forest. Gasps erupted. A few people stumbled back. Elena pressed her hand to her chest. The wolf was enormous, larger than any the villagers had ever seen. Its fur was silver gray, thick as winter fog, and its eyes were golden, intelligent, and strangely calm. There was no foam at its mouth, no snarl, no raised hackles. It was not hunting. It was not afraid. It simply walked, slow and deliberate, toward the gathering. A man at the front raised a rifle, but another villager grabbed his arm, afraid to provoke the animal. The wolf continued forward until it reached the very edge of the funeral group. It stopped, sniffed the air, and then its gaze fell, unwaveringly, on the small wooden casket. A shudder moved through the crowd. Why was it looking there? The wolf took a step closer. Someone shouted, "Stay back." Another yelled for the children to be taken inside. But the wolf didn't react to the noise. Its focus didn't waver. With a grace that didn't match its size, it walked straight toward the casket, and then something unbelievable happened. It stopped just inches away and lowered its body to the ground. Not in attack, not in threat, in mourning. Its chest pressed against the cold snow. Its head bowed low, its ears flattened. A soft, almost sorrowful whine escaped its throat, a sound so heartbreaking that even the bravest men felt their eyes sting. The village froze, stunned. It was as if the wolf knew the child. Alina's trembling hand covered her mouth. Her knees nearly buckled. She had seen wild animals before. Foxes, stray dogs, birds that perched softly on Anya's windowsill. But never had she seen a creature lower itself like this, like a grieving companion. The wolf crawled even closer until its muzzle gently touched the base of the casket. It closed its eyes. No one moved. No one breathed. Father Dimitri, his voice caught somewhere between awe and fear, whispered, "Dear God." Somewhere in the crowd, an elderly woman murmured, "Animals see what we cannot." Perhaps her spirit, perhaps the forest knows. The wolf's breathing was deep, steady, almost steadying the air around it. It stayed bowed, as though performing its own ritual, an ancient one, older than the church, older than the village. For a strange, suspended moment, grief was shared, not just by humans, but by the wild. Minutes passed, or maybe just seconds. Time no longer felt real. Then, abruptly, the wolf lifted its head. Its ears twitched. Its golden eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in alertness. It looked around, scanning each face, reading emotions the way only nature could. Then it looked back at the casket again, sniffing with urgency, pacing slightly. Something had changed in its behavior. It was no longer mourning. It was sensing something. The wolf circled the casket once, then twice, its movements growing sharper, more focused. People backed away, uncertain whether the animal had changed its intentions. The man with the rifle raised it again, but Father Dimitri put a trembling hand on the barrel. "Wait," the priest whispered. "It is trying to show us something." Elena could not move. Her heart pounded painfully inside her chest. She stared at the wolf, confused, frightened, hopeful, without knowing why. Suddenly the wolf stopped and pressed its paw against the casket. Pressed, not scratched, not attacked. Pressed, almost gently. A loud crack echoed somewhere in the silence, the sound of splintering ice on the river in the distance. The horses neighed restlessly. The wind picked up, sweeping snow across the churchyard in cold spirals. The wolf stepped back, head low, tail down, eyes locked on Elena. It let out a short, sharp, urgent bark. Not a howl, a bark, almost like a call. Then it turned and ran toward the forest, stopping only once to look back, waiting, watching, urging. The villagers exchanged confused, fearful looks. No one knew what to make of it. A wolf interrupting a funeral was strange enough. But a wolf behaving like it wanted them to follow. That was madness. But Elena felt something deep within her shift. A whisper, a tug so faint she barely sensed it. Instinct, hope, a mother's impossible, irrational belief. She didn't know. She only knew one thing. The wolf hadn't hurt them. It hadn't snarled or shown violence. If anything, it had grieved. What if it knew something they didn't? What if Anya, her breath hitched painfully. No, impossible. But the wolf barked again, louder this time, ears pointed straight at her. Elena stepped forward. A few villagers gasped. Others tried to hold her back. "Elena, don't. That animal is dangerous." But she pulled her arm free, her eyes fixed on the creature with a mixture of terror and trembling hope. "Let me go," she whispered. "Please." Her voice was soft, but it carried a strength that stopped everyone around her. She walked past the casket, her boots crunching through the snow. The wolf didn't move. It watched her with steady, intense focus. Step by step, she approached. 10 meters. 5, 2. The wolf bowed slightly, as if acknowledging her. And then, with a swift turn, it sprinted into the forest. Not vanishing, not hiding, leading. Elena's heart pounded like thunder in her chest. Without giving anyone a chance to stop her, she ran after it, disappearing into the shadowed trees. Behind her, the villagers stood frozen in shock and bewilderment. Father Dimitri's cross hung loosely from his trembling hand. Someone whispered, "Where is she going?" Another murmured, "Why did the wolf come?" But no one had an answer. All they knew was this. A funeral had been interrupted. A wolf had mourned a child. And now the child's mother had run into the forest after a creature no human should ever trust. But in her heart, deep beneath grief and fear, a spark flickered. What if her daughter was not gone? What if the wolf wasn't stopping the funeral, but saving it?